wording. It's come from Chris, and it's now going to be brought up onto the screen so that everyone can look at it. But I'll just quickly run through it. Notes the deputations made by the statutory consultees, New Zealand Police and Medical Officer of Health, and also the deputations made by Hospitality New Zealand and community members. Notes that one of the strong themes of these deputations was around issues related to consumption of alcohol from off-licence premises, including concerns around the density and location of off-licence premises. C does not pursue a local alcohol policy in the existing term, noting that the default provisions in the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act remain in place. D, requests staff to provide further information to Council on how the provisions of the district plan could be used and or strengthened to deal with issues arising from off-licence premises. E, requests staff work with the statutory consultees to gather relevant background information and identify any alcohol-related harm issues evident in Christchurch, especially as they relate to areas of concerns raised by recent deputations, and that this form the basis of a report to the incoming council at the immediate commencement of the 2019 to 2022 term. Notes that staff are working with community boards with regards to their role in district licensing committee hearings, and requests that as part of this work, staff and community boards examine options such as education, advocacy or support programs for communities to enable them to better engage with licensing processes and to submit on applications as necessary. Request staff advice on the makeup of the district licensing committee and suggest options to ensure accessibility and appropriate local community and community board representation on the committee. Invite Hospitality New Zealand to partner with residents associations to collaboratively work to minimise alcohol-related harm in residential areas using the Christchurch Alcohol Action Plan framework, and engage with Government and Local Government New Zealand to effect policy or legislative change that better ensures community views on minimising alcohol-related harm are taken into account. Actually, I wouldn't mind adding another little bit to that last one, which says, so instead of finishing on minimising alcohol-related harm are taken into account, and that the full suite of tools that are available to central government are utilised in order to minimise alcohol-related harm. Because, I mean, one of the issues is that we don't have the tools that central government has that would really make a difference in this area. Cool. Yeah. And you'd like to move that, Andrew?
Oh, do you want to move it?
Oh, okay. I'll move that. Okay, I'll move it and you second it. All right. So, Yep, that's fine. Yep, no, that's fine.
A couple of things here. Firstly, just looking at that number 5 there, requesting staff work with the statutory consultees to gather evidence. Just checking, we've been told previously that it was unlikely that the police, the medical officer of health and others would be likely to put the time and energy into doing that work if we hadn't confirmed that we were going for a local alcohol policy. Is that right?
That's our expectation.
Yeah. So number 5 is going to be difficult because we hadn't said that we were going to start. Yeah.
I think, well, there's a statutory requirement for them to provide the information that
if we've
need.
Started.
So yeah.
But only if we've started.
I guess that would be a point of debate, because the Act doesn't state that you need to start. It just states that they need to provide information relevant to preparing a LAP.
Okay, because what we'd heard previously is that they were unlikely to engage with us unless we'd made a resolution to proceed.
I think the implication is that they will be less enthusiastic about providing information in a timely way than they would be if proceeding with the option 1.
Okay, thanks. And when we're looking at the evidence and what is allowable, what work needs to be done, we had clearly last time sufficient evidence to be able to settle provisions that reduced off-licence hours and that reduced on-licence hours, and we were able to settle that in the previous iteration when we were developing the previous lab. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
But did we choose not to look at density and location because we couldn't get the evidence, or we didn't look for the evidence last time?
Viv may.
It goes back to 2013 before.
Yeah.
I mean, we did talk to the alcohol licensing inspectors back then, and their advice was there wasn't a problem about density because we were just coming out of the earthquakes at that point.
Right.
And so once we got further down the process, it was really too late then, so in 2015 or 16, to add in provisions about density.
Yeah. But now we've got much more accurate information about where all the off-licences are, and their density and location, proximity to schools and other sensitive sites, and so we should be able to gather evidence on those now.
Yep, and it would be my expectation that that would form part of the information that would come to the council in that early report.
Right. Thanks.
Glenn?
I think I'll leave my question.
Yeah. Mike and then Phil.
Thank you. If we were made the decision to have a lab, there's plenty of decision points along that process where the council would decide whether to proceed with it.
Correct.
And I think the earliest one would be probably late June.
According to the timeline we proposed, that would be at the point where the research had been undertaken and an analysis of any issues, alcohol-related issues or harm that are present in Christchurch had been identified, and an assessment of whether an LAP could in some way address those issues.
So we'd be in a much better position in June if we elected to go forward now, and be in a much better position in June to actually make that final decision whether we should proceed than actually right now.
Well, at that point, yes, you would have a better understanding of any issues that are present and of the likelihood of an LAP being a useful policy tool to address those. The report that has been presented so far was simply a high-level process-driven report. It doesn't pretend to have the research and analysis behind it on which the council would make a decision to have an LAP. It's asking whether you want to start that process.
Phil?
Can I just ask you, like you've just referred to the possibility, you've said likelihood of a LAP being a useful tool. So just for clarification for me, it just seems to me that the previous LAP was really ruled out by appeal. So, and it was sort of like a point, more than a point of law too, that is that an area which we should be asking or working with central government as in the last recommendation that we develop? So in fact we're part of making sure that the legislation actually works in the interests of the communities.
Yes, it would be. At the moment the process is highly exposed, I guess, to appeal, and the government and local government need to look at whether there are changes required that would make that less so.
And thank you. And since in the report it's quite clear that in all the major metropolitan areas there have been issues around passing a LAP. Is that like related to the fact that it is fraught legally, and particularly appeals are virtually easily allowed?
Correct.
Okay, and while I'm asking questions, I just might ask you a question too in relation to an area of particular interest in, and that is how, in fact, our district licensing committees how they might be broadened. So is it workable? My understanding is that in fact the licensing committee is something that as a council we set up. They are something that council run, right? So I'm just making sure that in fact my suggestion is feasible, and that is that in fact the committees be widened to and made more accessible really by having, for example, a community board representative on those committees. Where I'm coming from is that recently I sat in on a hearing, and it just seemed to me that in fact, while it's a judicial process, that in fact having it more kind of like open for ordinary people to be able to state their objections would be of use. But so I'm really asking, is this part workable?
Well, I think the request for staff to consider and report back to you on whether it's workable is workable.
Sure.
Whether or not our advice back to you satisfies that full extent of whether community boards, for example, community board members could be on the committee, let us do the work and understand the consequences of that. So we're happy to do that work and understand the consequences of it. But in respect to your first question, yes, the district licensing committees are effectively committees of council, but we just want to understand if we were to go down the path that suggests what the implications and arrangements would be, and make sure that there's no unintended consequences of
Sure, I understand. Thank you. And my last question really is, would local organisations, and the national too actually, for example, community law, would there be scope for them, organisations like them, to be involved to assist residents and those hearings panels?
My understanding is that community law are providing assistance to residents and residents groups, and Viv, you're engaging with community boards?
Yeah, so tomorrow we are speaking with the community board chairs about the process, so hopefully that will provide some more clarity, but I see that you are requesting some more work to be done in that respect. So,
Yanni?
I thought we just recently had a report and we just appointed a whole bunch of district licensing people.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
So I'm not quite sure like why we would be then looking at that again. It's we've just done it and we had a bit of a robust debate at the time. What's the point in doing it again?
Well, I think the request for staff to consider whether the existing provisions upon which you appoint to the district licensing committee are the same ones that you want going forward, and you're asking for staff advice effectively on whether that's the case. So we're happy to provide that advice. Whether you make any changes to either the makeup or the process for which you make appointments would be a matter for council.
Right. So my understanding from that report is that they're appointed for a certain term.
Yeah, we've got a current list. So if you go to the council webpage, District Licensing Committee, Christchurch City Council as of 18 December has appointed 4 DLCs for the period listed below, each made up of a commissioner and 2 persons from an approved list. So the commissioners are appointed for 5 years, 5 years, 3 years, 3 years, and then there's a list of members who've got 3-year or 5-year appointments, depending on when they were appointed.
I'm just worried if we're asking you to do a whole bunch of work that this material not going to actually make any changes, because we can't make any changes in the next 3 years.
Well, I'm not sure that's a question that we can answer. You could ask us not to do the work, I suppose, but I don't think that's what you were intending. We're happy to do the work if that's what you wish, but we don't want to predetermine the outcome of that work. What we're saying is we'll report back to council, and it might well be that we say, this is it and this is appropriate and it's a skill-based appointment, and ultimately there matters for council to exercise your judgment on, or it might be that we report back and say actually you might want to consider different skills in the makeup of the district's licensing committees, but without us doing the work we wouldn't want to predetermine either what the outcome of that work is or ultimately what your decision on it is.
But I think the question was more basic. Could we actually appoint additional people?
You can always appoint additional people.
Yeah, you can appoint additional.
Yeah. Right, okay. So we could expand.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're made up of a commissioner and 2 persons from an approved list. So the question is how long's the approved list, and can we expand the list? So, I mean, there's no harm in requesting this information because that will assist consideration of the committee as it stands, or the list of people who can form a committee, and also could support the next council in making decisions as well.
And I just had a second question, which was the alcohol harm-related strategy. Just like, I'm still kind of, like if I look at 5, I'm just a little bit puzzled about these 2 separate processes. So how is this process tying in with that process?
The LAP is a regulatory tool, and the strategy is a non-regulatory collaboration between the council, police and the DHB. So the 2, I guess, are seeking similar goals, but taking quite different approaches to achieve those goals.
Yeah.
Right. So do you think there'd be merit in just actually combining, like a working party around those 2, so that the same information, the same evidence is being presented at the same time?
The evidence that was used as the basis for the alcohol action plan is well referenced in that plan, and we can quite easily use it in any consideration towards an LAP.
Very good. All right, well, I'll open it up for debate then. Andrew.
Thank you. And this is a question I've wrestled with quite a bit over the last few days. Clearly, the question is whether we embark on what could be a long and protracted and expensive process of developing an LAP and starting that now, or whether we leave that to a future council. And in my view, there are 3 issues that we're really needing to deal with here. The first of which is that communities are fully involved in both decision making and outcomes in licensing decisions. The other, and this really is responding to the submissions that we heard last week, is dealing with issues particularly around off-licences and density and proliferation. And I would suggest particularly in suburban areas and maybe in certain low socioeconomic suburban areas, which seem to have been a target for applications for these type of licences. And then the other issue is if we are to develop as a council an LAP, we want to do that in an environment which means that we get the best possible policy outcomes and the best policy that's most appropriate for the issues that we face here in this city. So there are a number of these resolutions deal with the issues as I see them quite effectively. They certainly ensure that we do the work to see where the community can be more greatly involved, more effectively involved in licensing decisions that affect communities at the local level. We're obviously going to be looking at where there might be the opportunity for community board members or community board members to be better represented on the district licensing committees and what involvement the community boards might have in delivering better outcomes, making sure that communities are better resourced and better educated around what their involvement in the processes might be. We're also taking the time to do some of the work that would need to be done in preparation of embarking on a local alcohol policy in time for the next council to start to consider that at the very beginning of the term, and that certainly would be my expectation, that they would want to be looking at that at the very beginning of the term to give them time to go through what could be a lengthy and protracted process to come out with those good policy outcomes. And in my view, the best way to achieve this would not be to embark on this now with limited time because of an arbitrary date at the end of this triennium, which is the 2019 council elections. That inevitably means that it would need to be a time-limited process to achieve an outcome by that date. That quite possibly means that there would be a limitation on the amount of community engagement and involvement there could be in developing the policy. And it also means that we would be reaching the final stages of developing the LAP at exactly the same time as we were going through the final stages of a local body election campaign, and I don't believe that's the kind of environment that would produce the best policy, even if every councillor around this table was fully focused on that rather than an election campaign. I don't think it's the policy, and it's an environment where we'd be creating the best possible policy long term around local alcohol. So to give this a fair chance of working, I think is something that would be better handled by the next council than this council in a time-constrained environment. And I think we're doing absolutely the right thing by responding to the most important issues, as I see them, as quickly as we possibly can, and in fact probably more quickly than developing a local alcohol policy at this particular time would allow us to do.
Dion?
I support having a local alcohol policy for the city, because I think there are issues where communities do need to have a little bit more involvement. But the reality that we're facing right now with making a decision on the LAP is that we're going to be fast-tracking an LAP process because we have to start from scratch again. And there are two big risks with that for me that I don't think are acceptable at this point in time. And one of them outlined in the report is there's a risk that stakeholders and community members who want to be involved in the process to prepare the draft local alcohol policy are unable to engage because of the expedited process. That's a big red flag for me. If we're going to do one of these things, we need to do it right, and we need to do it well. And I think if we get all of the background information that we do need to do an LAP ready for the new council, it's a sensible way to move forward. Number 8 on the resolutions is one that I put in there because we do have communities who have been in this process for nearly 7 or 8 years with this LAP. Central City residents that I represent, who do need to be recognised that they've put a lot of time and effort into contributing to whatever way of the argument that they've been on, but they need to be involved in the interim while we don't have a LAP. And I think that's a sensible way for using the Christchurch Alcohol Action Plan, which we signed off on last year, to actually get those communities involved. And actually, using the non-regulatory approach might actually have better benefits than actually putting the stick down and having a regulatory approach to, especially in areas where bars and restaurants and entertainment areas are close to residential locations. So I think this is a sensible way to move forward. We're going to do the background work to get this done right so that we can start looking at this in the new term and actually get it done so that we can actually then move forward with a vibrant heart of our city, because we all do want a nice nightlife in our city, but we also want to have safe environments for people to be able to enjoy the city life, the city culture, and I think this is a very sensible way to move forward. So I'll support those resolutions.
Anyone else? Sarah, Vicky?
I don't want us to give up on a local alcohol policy and defer it to a future council. We don't need to fast track this. I know there's a stated position that we would need to get it done before the next election cycle, but actually, as a council organisation, many plans and policies and strategies that the organisation and then the governance approves go over several council terms. The organisation doesn't just stop work because there's an election. Elections are every 3 years. In the middle of that period, there's an LAP, and that takes up lots of time and energy as well. And so every 18 months, there's something huge for the council to do. And I would be happy with us getting started on this now and potentially leaving it to the next council to notify, but actually doing the work for that council. Many of us may be around next time. It's not going to be 17 new faces around the table, I wouldn't think. There will be some institutional knowledge, and we've done that through several large plans at this point, including our district plan. The local alcohol policy is not a silver bullet. It's one tool, but it's the one that we've got. Council chose to act when the Medical Officer of Health recommended chlorinating our water supply, even when the risk was low. And we shouldn't delay now, when every weekend our A&E is full of those who have been impacted by the misuse of alcohol, the injuries, car accidents and domestic violence, and abuse of hospital staff. When the police tell us that they don't have the resourcing and won't be able to enforce a bylaw on street-based sex workers, we believe them, as controversial and difficult as that was, and we look to the evidence about what actually works. And here the police are telling us that they want this, that this works to reduce harm in our communities, and our communities are telling us the same. They come to us time and time again asking for us to regulate off licences. In many ways, this is the same issue that we've faced as a country before with the harm that smoking caused. Those with vested interests fought changes, both the manufacturers of cigarettes and the hospitality industry, yet only a few years on, and we marvel that it was so controversial, and we recognise that we are much healthier for it at both an individual and a national level. We know that there is evidence available to regulate because we were able to settle provisions in the last LAP which limited the hours of off licences, and the evidence is now likely to be available about the density and proximity to sensitive places such as schools. Even if we end up not being able to alter the density and location, we already know that we can shorten the hours that each of them are open by 21 hours a week, and that will make a difference to our communities. I'm not going to support number 3. Many of the other provisions resolutions I have no problem with, but I'd like to ask for number 3 to be put separately, please.
Fine. Vicky, Yanni, Phil, Glenn. Oh God, I might as well just go around the room, eh?
Can I just ask a question of the rest of what Sarah said?
No.
Okay, I'll pass on.
But you can do it in debate.
Well, no, it's just a yes or no answer.
Oh, no. Oh.
The issue that we've got is that most of us want to effect changes in the density and the hours of operation of the off licences. The Medical Officer of Health even told us that the safest place to have a drink was in a bar. And that's fine. I don't think that's the area we want to go into. We want to go into the fact that there are off licences everywhere, particularly in low-income areas and in sensitive...
Sorry, this does sound like the speech.
But what I want to know is the bit that Sarah said about we could limit that from our previous LAP. Was there any way legally that we could just pick up that bit and do it? The limiting on the hours, at least.
Well, hang on, we made the decision not to proceed with that.
We can't do a bit of it? Okay.
Well, no, but we made the decision not to proceed.
So we can't do any part of it?
Whether, I mean, nobody, yeah.
Okay, that's the answer.
Well, no, we made the decision not to proceed. I don't know the answer to the question that you're asking because I can't recall. But what's the... What is the point? We made the decision not to proceed.
Not to proceed with the current LAP.
Yes.
Can we proceed with a part of it that is already...
No, we've already made the decision not to proceed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to go around the table. Yanni?
Thank you. So a lot of actually what's in here is just duplicating what we've already agreed to do under the Alcohol Action Plan. So you know, it's good to reinforce that stuff is happening, but I do hope that we can get a joint up process around getting this information. I did wonder whether 3 should be changed to do not pursue a local alcohol policy at this point in time, because I would hope that the work will begin, and it's already happening, I would hope through the Alcohol Action Plan, that if the evidence then starts to point in a direction where it is clear that there's things that we can address through a lap, then I'd like us to start it. I don't want us to, I mean, personally, my view is that this is not about whether we've got an upcoming election or not. It's actually about being able to support through the process with evidence to get the outcomes that the community are seeking. And at the moment, it feels to me, given what's happened in Auckland, Wellington, Dunedin, that we don't have systems in place where we can actually take a credible, have a credible conversation with our community over how we address developing a lap. So I just think that there's a lot of work that has gone on. As someone who sat through the process last time, I did think it was a mistake. We're in debate. So I did think that we spent like thousands of hours looking into this. This will be a very, if we agree to do a lap now, it will be a very intensive piece of work. And we've got major pressures on us in terms of, I think, the next at least 6 months, at least to the end of this year, around things like our long-term plan, our relationship with central government, a number of key infrastructure decisions, and so forth. So, you know, I think we need to keep doing work around getting the evidence that can show that we can develop a really coherent plan. But having said that, the irony, of course, is that our submission initially in 2011 asked government, pleaded with government to be very clear about what evidence was required, because we were so concerned at that time that they were setting us up to fail. And I think if you look back to our submission, you look at what's happened around New Zealand, and with our plan, you can see that the legislation was a mess, and it didn't actually help. It made it very difficult for people. It's wasted a lot of money and time, and I think it's a totally unsatisfactory process. So let's get a better process and spend the time getting the things in order before we agree to do a lap. I don't think we should be doing it because of this term. I would just say that we did hear comment that we could proceed and justify the 21 hours. My understanding from what we went through is that we basically had to go back on the hours of operation that we proposed to reduce because we couldn't support it. So I'm not quite sure where that argument is coming from, because my understanding is we couldn't justify the proposal that we'd put in, which was to reduce the off-licence hours. So
I've spoken, since I'm allowed to do this, I'm spoken to the seconder of the resolution. We're quite happy to change the words from in the existing term to at this time. Yeah. Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say something along those lines. So 3, that changes that. Yeah. Well, our communities, not only our communities, but communities throughout New Zealand have made it very clear they want to take control and have a say in their communities of where these places go. So I think it is essential. It's been proven to us, the last process that we went through, that we're unable to do it for whatever reason, and it hasn't worked. So I think that this is essential, especially 9, to go to government. We've got a new government to say, hey, look, legislation isn't working. Your communities, our communities throughout New Zealand are saying that we need control and want control and should have control. So I'm going to reluctantly support this at this stage, but to make it very clear that our communities have made it clear to us and we have a responsibility to them first. Thank you.
Glenn?
Okay, thank you. It seems to me that there are problems here on different levels. One being inherently that it's called a LAP, a local alcohol policy, and it could be that the process on that level the process has been flawed from the word go. We are past a lot of things from central government that have been in the past, and some things we're still waiting on. For instance, a climate change policy direction. So my views on, well, maybe I could express that better. My views on this are that actually it is time for the council to say when for our city on the abuse of alcohol, but it's how we do it. And if not support for a lap, then I think we can do it, or it could be done through the district plan provisions. If you look at the kind of the preamble or the introduction actually to a district plan, including our own plan, it says that a district plan must state the objectives for the district, the policies to implement them, and the rules to implement the policies. So we already have a kind of a vessel in which our policies are contained, being the district plan. So that's already there. So this could be another tool by which to give effect to it, because I still believe that we actually do need a position. We can't just put it off and kick it into the never never. We actually need to get on with it at some point. So let's do policy another way, through district plan provisions, but please, let's get cracking. I don't sense any real change in some drinking habits from from decades ago.
you know, the students down south, they're still the same from 30 years ago. You know, they're still the same here. And it runs through all age groups as well. So when are we actually going to grasp the nettle and take a position as the local leaders? So let's go for it. I'm very keen on the provisions around off licences. Specifically, we'll be dealing with density and location, I hope, holistically, and there's a wider picture over the cynical placement as well of pokies and takeaway outlets. Those two things are outside the remit of what we're doing here, but actually it's all part of a picture of some of the things that can that are really unhelpful in some of our communities. So let's just get into it and not put it off. Do policy, but do it a different way.
Phil?
Look, councillors, there are a lot of issues here, but I think the bottom line, unfortunately, is that the local alcohol policy is not sufficiently supported by the legislation. In effect, if we continue down this route alone, without the changes in legislation, we continue to be on a hiding to nothing. And what's happened to all the 4 metropolitan areas just proves that point. I'm aware that, like, there's been comments that still the LAP could be a tool which we could develop and use when we can, but the fact is right now the LAP as a tool isn't strong enough. It just is not working. It lacks sufficient strength. And so we've put up a number of areas, I think, here that in fact can be worked on. I think clearly, like, the whole objective of the LAP is that it has to reflect the views and wishes of the people, and currently it's not able to. So that we are taking some measures, I hope, that will actually be able to strengthen the local community's ability to actually be involved and make decisions around, for example, the liquor outlets in the area. I was fortunate to attend a very strong case that the local people in Barrington put recently, and they won. And they had good support from council, certainly good support from their community board, and a number of other groups in Christchurch have done that. And I think we need to look at how we can empower our community groups. So in fact, in the interim, they'll be able to take these steps. So I think that altogether the recommendations here are sensible, practical steps that we can take, and they will make a difference. And I look forward to getting more specific information back as to what we can do to intervene.
Dion's already done. Pauline?
Yeah, look, I support what Phil said to the LAP in its current state, or is not actually going to serve our purpose today. I agree that the resolutions here we have interfaced really well with the Alcohol Action Plan, as Yanni pointed out so well, and Dion as well. And in a way to address, thank you, the issues of the density and the locations of the off-licence are definitely an issue that's been brought to our attention loud and clear by local communities. And these are the people who are directly affected, and they've made that known to us very clearly, and I think that we've actually addressed that quite well in the resolution. Look, I also agree with Dion continuing along the non-regulatory path by advocating strong communication between Hospitality New Zealand and local groups. And I'd like to remind councillors that back in the day, before the quakes I think, look, we used to run host responsibility awards, and they were run by the community boards. And actually that was a really effective way to maintain contact with hospitality venues and to encourage and remind them and to be proactive to promote harm reduction by undertaking good practice. And that was a really good response to that, and it was a really, really, really good practice. So we could look at, reinventing that again. And so today I'll support this resolution. They have a strong emphasis on empowering the voice of our community, and I think that's a good way to start.
Mike?
Thank you. The LAP, yet again, is another example of a hospital pass from central government to local government. You only have to go to the hospital's A&E on the weekends to see the issue of alcohol, and that's just some of it. It is a tool that we can utilise, and I think it's important that we actually carry on and create a LAP, and I won't be supporting item 3, and I hope others don't. I just don't buy the election year as a reason not to pursue this actually important tool that we can actually use for local communities. And it's very, very clear if we look through the framework and the process that actually there's many points along the line that we can make decisions not to proceed. In fact, the first one is in June, into June, and that's going to be a case of actually collecting a lot of information, a lot of evidence, and working out the next best steps. I don't know why we wouldn't right now say, let's go off the lap and have another look at the end of the June. It's not, we need to have that courage to move forward. And I come back to the elections in 2019. What, do we not make any decisions in 2019 because it's election year? It's just not a good enough excuse. I won't be supporting 3. I'll support the rest, but I hope others also follow that lead.
Anne?
So, the Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Alistair Humphreys, recently said that a global evidence base of detailed research and analysis of alcohol supply and impact data tells us the simple, obvious truth that the more alcohol is made available to the population, the more excess, that is, hazardous levels of alcohol use will be consumed, and the more harm will be experienced by that population. So we all recognise that alcohol is a toxic substance that must be treated with respect to protect the health of our communities, their physical, mental, emotional and social well-being. So this decision today is actually an opportunity that provides us in a way to respond to local communities that have, the local conditions that have developed and are developing in our city and district. So in making this decision, we must demonstrate that we are listening to and valuing the voice of our community boards, many of who are expressing great concern at the proliferation of cheap liquor outlets near schools and in communities that are already paying an unfair price because of the easy access to alcohol. It's an opportunity for us all to acknowledge these concerns regarding alcohol-related harm and proceed with urgency to provide resources to community boards who wish to challenge the proliferation and density of off-licence premises. So I am supportive of these resolutions, including specifically the establishment of maybe a specific staff role to manage the supporting of community boards as they engage in this process. So I wonder if we could perhaps enlarge, is it number 6 up there, to maybe consider that there is a designated role that community boards can come to for legal advice, for support in their fighting, taking these cases on. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. For quite some time I've been opposed to the LAP process entirely. Having said that, I do recognise that there is a problem with alcohol harm, but I don't consider that an LAP process is an effective way to deal with that issue. We've noted earlier, other speakers have noted that the Medical Officer of Health considers that the bars are safest places for alcohol consumption, and our previous LAPs adopted a broader attitude to dealing with alcohol, when in reality I think it's pretty well recognised now that there are 2 issues that are giving rise to most of the problems that we have in the city, and they are a proliferation of off-licences, and secondly the pricing structures that some of these off-licences are able to indulge in. So I actually believe that the best way that we can be dealing with these issues, well, the first one anyway, the proliferation of off-licences, is through the district process. We need to be strongly lobbying government to get back our right to amend our district plan as we see fit, and to actually restrict the areas where these off-licences are generating, to impose density of off-licences in particular areas. And it is no hidden secret that the lower socio-economic areas of our city have been targeted for expansion of alcohol outlets. We also have other tools in our arsenal that I think we could be using more effectively as well. People have mentioned the Alcohol Action Plan, and we also have the ability through our bylaw process to have alcohol bans in areas that are posing particular problems to our city. I have some reservations. Look, generally I support the resolution that's here before us, but I do have trouble with reconciling probably 3 and 5. One, obviously, I'm really prefer us not to go down an LAP process at all. And secondly, in 5, you know, we are committing a large amount of staff time to a process which, if we are now looking to defer this decision to the next term of this council, we could realistically end up in a situation where that new council decides not to have an LAP at all, and we've expended a huge amount of time and effort and staff expense in a process that may not be picked up on in the next term. So I would have preferred to have voted for a resolution that indicated that we were not going to proceed with an alcohol policy at this time, and we deferred any decision making on whether to proceed and whether to enact any further work in this area until that council made that decision. So I will support the motion before us, but probably would ask for number 5 to be put separately, and I can't support that one at this stage. Thank you.
Yeah, a couple of months ago, during the regulatory performance committee meeting, in that time I already in favor of option 2 rather than the option 1, because while as a council I always thought we should take the prudent way, you know, to make a recommendation or make the decision. Because if we're back to the 2012 until the 2013 September, I was the hearing panel. I was the kind of member. We take at least 18 months to establish the, after they become the provisional local policy. They spend about at least $1.5 to the $2 million. So we need to take the prudent way. But even, you know, today we take the option 2 until for the next incoming council. It means we are not, you know, do nothing. Because you review all those items, we still take a positive way to something. First one, probably evidence we are all aware, that's very important. This paragraph, summary paragraph, actually collect those sufficient information to the next incoming the council. You know? They can to establish this local policy smoothly, effectively, and efficiently. That's most very important, especially regarding to those statutory consulted police, DHB specialists. I still remember back to several years ago, those statutory consulted, they make a presentation, you know, very impressive. Today I still remember that one. But whether those information after several years have any kind of a change, then we need to collect update the information. That's very important. The other one is particular time frame. Because last time we established the local alcohol policy, it's still the same. Take the 18 months. Then September, we mentioned give to the next, the incoming council. So if we review the 9.19 in here, one of these advantages of option 1 is this option is unlikely to provide an opportunity for the incoming council to have significant input to the policy. Then if we review all those, the option 1, those 11 the process steps, every step we need to pass through. So I doubt whether in September 2019, this the local policy will be put to the public notified. I doubt, because we already, have this kind of experience. So time frames we need to consider as well. So I think this one is a quite holistic way and also robust thinking. So I support this one. Thank you.
Rev? Might as well.
Might as well. Free hit. Yeah, look, I'm glad to see that the council has come to its senses on this, and I very much support not pursuing a local alcohol policy at this time. I think the problems that we're trying to solve, which in the main are off licences in local areas, can be dealt with through either the district plan or district licensing committees, and we definitely need to be a bit stronger there. The other issues really need to be dealt with by the government. I mean, the Law Commission was very clear about this. They made the recommendations about minimum pricing. The government needs to get on with it and save us all a lot of time and money. So I think when you put those two things together, there's no point us doing another local alcohol policy. Let the next council have a look at where the government is on this and take it from there. And in the meantime, we should do some work on making sure that we've got the powers around off licenses in community areas. And that's where we should put most of our energy and effort. The rest of it is really a central government issue.
Thank you. I'm really glad that somebody finally referred to the Law Commission report, because I did recommend to everyone that they read it before they come here for the debate today. So let me just quote from it. It is recognised in the international literature that there are 7 major policy levers available to reduce alcohol-related harm. Regulating the physical availability of alcohol through restrictions on time, place and density of outlets, regulating conduct in commercial drinking establishments, taxing alcohol and imposing controls on price, regulating advertising, promotions and marketing, imposing penalties for alcohol-related antisocial behaviour such as drink driving, education and persuasion with the provision of information, and increased availability of treatment programs with screening and brief interventions in healthcare. Now, if you actually look at what is required, you actually need a combination of those. You don't get effective change in behaviour unless you use the multiplicity of tools that are available. We've been sold a pup. The community's been sold a pup. They think that they've got their ability to determine local alcohol plans, and they don't, because the one thing that the community, kept putting their hand up about and saying we want more than anything else over and over again is we don't want bottle stores in our neighbourhoods selling cheap liquor in our neighbourhoods. That's what we don't want. And it's the one thing that our local alcohol plan couldn't have delivered anyway, because there wasn't sufficient evidence available at the time when a council thought it was a good idea to get on with the job ahead of the city getting back to situation as normal. They might have had the right heart for it, but they weren't engaging the brain. They really should have waited until our city was settled down. But the requirement of the local alcohol policy to actually, or plan, whatever it's called now, the requirement that it has to show the connection between its impact and alcohol-related harm and minimising alcohol-related harm has set a bar that is too high when you consider it on its own. And, if I can walk into a supermarket and see clean skin wine or clear skin wine, whatever it is, for $6.99 a bottle, it's 750 mils of alcohol. Was it? Oh God! I mean, but when you see that, that's the problem. When you see proliferation of outlets that are just driving down the price of alcohol, that's the problem. We can't solve that problem. So I fully support the holding off of this. Not because there's an election going to happen next year. And in fact, I actually resent the fact that it is even considered that that would be the basis for putting this off. A previous council developed a plan and then left it to an incoming council to notify. We delayed notification because we could see that the city was still developing, still forming, and still going to face a number of challenges as new patterns of the development of some of these establishments occurred. I thought that the medical officer of health gave outstanding deputation to our council, and he said that the safest place to drink is on licensed premises, and it is true. That is the safest place to drink. We have a very good working relationship in the city, always have done, with Hospitality New Zealand. We've got we've had a one-way door policy operating in this city before they were operating in other cities. That I was certainly aware of that before I became the mayor. Having been to many meetings, I've been out on the streets with the police before midnight and after midnight. I've seen what the city was like. I have to say that the fact that our city was the front page poster child of the Law Commission's report is not something that any one of us should be proud of. But our city's getting back on its feet, and I want us to be able to work with central government to develop a suite of tools that they will implement, and then we are able to do our job. I just thought I'd end, since not all of you have read the Law Commission report, I just thought I'd end with what they had proposed should be put in legislation, which is restricting the times alcohol can be sold, restricting places, etc., preventing a growing proliferation of alcohol outlets. But it said providing for local alcohol policies to be decided by councils. So that's the key to making them successful. And financing liquor licensing, monitoring and compliance through licence fees, not a combination of fees and ratepayer contributions. And that sheets home the costs where they belong. So that's why I support the resolution that we are now presenting. But there are several want to vote on number 3 separately, so I'll put number 3. Or number 5, okay. Sorry, what, just to take out the reference to the report? Is that okay? Yeah, okay. So just remove after that. Take and afterwards. Yeah. Okay. So I'll put number 5. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. So hands up for number 5. No. Manji and East. And I'll put number 3. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. So that's Davidson and Templeton. Is that all? Yep. And I'll put the balance of the recommendations. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much.